Hello, everyone, and welcome to this specific session. Um, Today, we are talking about a critical topic that is in everyone's conversation. Artificial intelligence comes with data governance, comes with data centers, comes with cybersecurity, comes with digital and technical skills, and eventually comes with development. For me, it's particularly a pleasure to be here sharing this event with TVI and welcome you all. I pass it to my colleague Peichin and welcome everyone. Over to you, Peichin.
Thank you very much, Antonio, and thank you to the Asian Development Bank for this partnership. As Antonio mentioned, today's conversation could not be more timely. At the Tony Blair Institute for Global Change, our mission is to work with governments and global leaders to deliver change that improves people's lives. And this is why we're really delighted to collaborate on this event with the Asian Development Bank, because I believe we share a common commitment to ensure that the digital transition and new technologies can support inclusive growth as well as opportunities across the region. Before I jump into the presentation, I also would like to acknowledge my co-author for this paper, Dr. Sahara Sadiq, from the Institute for Adult Learning and the Singapore University for Social Sciences. Her thought leadership has been central to this work. And later on, you will hear from her because she will be moderating our panel discussion later, and we will be diving deep into how augmented intelligence can be a force for inclusion and human potential across Southeast Asia. So I think we've done the welcome and opening remarks, and we're ahead of time, which is quite rare. So I'm very happy to kick us off with the key findings from our new report by TBI and IAL, titled Augmenting Intelligence, Shaping the Future of Work in Southeast Asia. Just let me get the slides up. Just a moment. I hope everyone can see this. Okay, great. Please give me a shout if there are any technical hiccups. So I think, let me begin with a very simple observation, which is that across Southeast Asia, we observe that technology is not just changing the nature of work, but it is more fundamentally disrupting the policies that shape social mobility due to Gen AI's impact on knowledge work. So Sahara and I started out about a year ago asking a fundamental question, which is how can policymakers ensure that technology augments human potential rather than to displace it? And a very quick word on methodology before we dive into it. It is to say that, as we attempted to answer this research question, we decided to take a participatory policy-making approach. And this means that we bring diverse stakeholders together to surface challenges and to co-create solutions. Given that AI adoption in this region is still at a nascent stage, many of the issues that we are discussing are emergent, and therefore this method is particularly valuable for complex issues where no single actor holds all the answers. So what we did over the course of 6 months was to carry out in-depth interviews and focus group discussions with the workers themselves, as well as co-design sessions with other important stakeholders across the ecosystem, including industry players, policymakers, unions, researchers, and so on. And this took place across Singapore, Vietnam, and the Philippines. And together, these research activities gave us their lived experiences, as well as collective ideas on how AI can reshape work in the region. So going back in time, what we saw in the last 200 years of industrial revolutions, from mechanization in the 18th century to automation in the 20th century, these have all primarily affected lower skilled jobs. But just in the last 2 to 3 years, we know what happened. The unleashing of Gen AI has disrupted the century-old pattern by impacting high-skilled work disproportionately. And this has been echoed through global studies from the ILO to OECD to the IMF, and they all highlighted AI's disruption to cognitive roles that were previously assumed to be safe, although not immune, from technological displacement. Here we see different sort of percentages, but they're all hinting at the same direction. And what does this mean? It means that it shifts the economic calculus of cognitive roles, or also known as knowledge work. In an era of cognitive abundance, the wages of professional roles may decline. There are some mixed research findings on this area, with some professions experiencing wage increase and some experiencing wage decline. But the implications extend beyond wages, because these shifts carry deeper social consequences. I'm sure some of these headlines are not foreign to you. I think what is important to highlight here is that a lot of existing models of social mobility are built on the assumption that cognitive or knowledge work, especially in professional white-collar roles, they offer a viable pathway to social economic movement, and the upending of these sort of traditional assumptions of upward mobility can entail long-lasting consequences. Oops, sorry, just go back a little bit. Because our current education system and the way that the industry is designed with career progression structures and wage structures, as well as expectations, they're all typically anchored on the belief that investing in cognitive skills can yield higher returns in the longer term. But as AI systems, as I mentioned, increasingly take on tasks that are historically performed by knowledge workers, this foundation is starting to erode. But if AI is shrinking the number of traditional knowledge work or cognitive work, where will social mobility come from? And if traditional models that we're used to can no longer ensure equitable social economic transitions, then there is an urgent need for a fundamental change in how policymakers approach education and skills development, economic growth, as well as social mobility in the age of AI. And this is why government action becomes really crucial. In order to stimulate demand by targeting jobs performed by humans that are embedded with AI. These are what we call AI augmented roles. So instead of artificial intelligence, we wanted to put the focus on augmented intelligence. And why do governments need to do this? Because if left alone, private sector will most likely favor cost-efficient, low-risk automation over the more complex and perhaps yet unproven AI augmentation strategies. We already see this with some companies, like a fintech company, Klarna, who proclaimed that, chatbots can do the work of their workers and went on to lay off 700 people. But what happened after that was that they experienced a decline in their performance of the chatbots, and therefore they went on to rehire the workforce. And with these sort of lessons emerging, I think what we need government to do are two key things. One is to go beyond the indiscriminate automation of existing cognitive work, and second, to elevate the cognitive content of currently what is perceived as low and mid-skilled jobs. And these are sort of applied jobs, which I will give you some examples later. And this is so that we can leverage on AI not only for productivity gains, but also to enhance job quality and social resilience for longer term economic, and social gains. In order to achieve this, we need to relentlessly imagine, because in the era of AI, this is not business as usual. This requires reimagining how AI can transform and improve work, as well as organizational practices, business models, and even entire industries. And importantly, these are not just work shifts. These are reinventions, where AI does not replace human effort, but it is there to amplify it by creating new and innovative roles in both public and private sectors that were previously once unimaginable. So these are some examples, and there are a lot more in the paper. So imagine gardeners becoming tree doctors because they have at their disposal the ability to diagnose and treat plant disease with AI-powered precision. Imagine customer service professionals evolving into customer scientists as they harness data to predict and to tailor personalized experience for customers. Envision paramedics becoming emergency response specialists because they are equipped with AI to co-pilot systems that provide real-time medical insights that are crucial in times of emergency. So these are just some examples in terms of how roles can be imagined in the future. So how do we move from AI to AI? As technology advances, the collaboration between human intelligence and machine capabilities become increasingly vital. We should explore how automation can enhance productivity whilst still valuing the unique skills that humans can bring to the table. This is what augmentation is about. And in order to reap AI dividends, organizations will have to go through a phase of understanding the technology's value for their specific needs, identifying appropriate use cases, and thoroughly testing the solutions with human in and over the loop. And by having a people-centered AI strategy, strategic goals that are aligned with employee needs, organizations can then create environments where AI creates value add, enhance job quality, and allow employees to engage in more meaningful work. This means that successful AI integration requires a long-term management strategy that focuses on human-AI collaboration, and this goes beyond just automation. We advocate that companies play the long game to use AI in a way that is most productive when supporting employees, not replacing them. And this is why AI policy making requires a people-centered AI strategy. In order to realize the transformative potential of AI, policymakers need to create conditions for human-machine co-intelligence to flourish. With this example, I was thinking about Star Wars, where in the show, no one is taking over anyone's jobs, right? But together, the Jedis and the robots can achieve much more than what one party can do. And this is what we mean by co-intelligence. How can we help each other so that we can flourish and thrive together? In our paper, we identified 4 key aspects for governments to consider how policy frameworks can support this urgent transition so that we can enable a future where technology enhances human capabilities. So I won't have time to go into every single one, but in the paper itself, we have country-specific recommendations for Singapore, Vietnam, and the Philippines. But in the interest of time, I'm just going to go through each of the pillar at a broader level so that we can leave some time for discussion after that. So let's start with policy. If we want AI to truly support people and businesses, then governments need to take the lead with clear forward-looking strategies. We are talking about national plans that don't just focus on technology itself, but on how AI can work best with people. And this means setting up smart priorities, making sure that regulations reflect societal values and stay flexible enough for us to be able to keep up with how fast things are changing. And fundamentally, it is also about building trust. So having strong national leadership is essential so that we can keep things safe, accountable, and well coordinated. Next up, the economy. Instead of using AI to cut jobs for short-term profit gains, in the case of Klarna, as I mentioned, we have a real opportunity here to use AI to boost what people are already good at. To make that happen, the private sector, requires support from government. Government can play a really big role here by investing in digital infrastructure, supporting SMEs to adopt AI, and by creating innovation-friendly environments. Public-private partnerships will be critical to ensure that everyone has access to these tools and that businesses, big and small, can use AI to create real value and to transform jobs in ways that benefit workers. It is important to ensure that there is widespread accessibility so that we don't end up in the situation where only big companies can benefit and leaving small companies behind. As we know, SMEs are a key engine for job growth and prosperity in many countries. So now let's talk about the workforce. Building AI talent isn't just about training tech experts. It is about raising the overall AI literacy of the entire workforce. We need to make sure that people at every level, from frontline workers to managers, have the skills to be able to collaborate with intelligent systems and to adapt as their roles evolve. Because even the smartest workers now have to contend with the smartest AI. And we have seen scenarios whereby job seekers and recruiters are trying to outsmart each other by using AI apps. So is it really about who's the best for the job or who has access to the best tools? And this also means rethinking education and training models, not just with technical know-how, but also with 21st century skills, such as critical thinking, creativity, communication, and collaboration. These are what we refer to commonly as the 4 Cs for the 21st century. And again here, public-private partnerships play a crucial role in this process, ensuring that training programs remain aligned with evolving industry needs and that workers are prepared for roles in AI-augmented environments as they emerge. Finally, society. There is a proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, bring other people along with you. So if we want AI to work for everyone, people need to have a voice in shaping it. And this is, again, why we took the participatory research approach, because we needed very much to put workers' voices at the heart of this. Governments need to create inclusive spaces where communities can take part in designing how AI is being used, just like the foresight sessions that we have seen in Singapore and countries like Finland. And encouraging citizen-led projects isn't just about engagement. It is about giving people ownership, making sure that AI outcomes are meaningful, grounded in real societal needs. I've come to the end of a very, very short presentation. And I'm sure, with this finding in mind, I'm very happy now to turn to our panel, moderated by Dr. Sahara Sadiq, where we will explore further what this means for Southeast Asia's future of work. So let me now hand it over. Thank you.
Thank you, Pei Chin. Thank you so much for the presentation. This is a joint study by TBI and IAL, and we are very happy to bring it forward to the community for a deep discussion. And this is a discussion that many of us are already having at our dinner tables, etc., about the disruptive effects of AI and who's going to be affected the most. And we want to bring these perspectives for a deep discussion today. Very happy to have with us my fellow panelists. Could you come on board, turn on your cameras, and let's do a round of introduction. May I first introduce everyone to Mr. Leandro Angelo Aguirre, former Deputy Privacy Commissioner, National Privacy Commission, Philippines. Dino? May I also introduce Emmanuel Pillay, ASEAN Head of Training and Development, AWS, Amazon Web Services. And our two speakers today, earlier, Pei Chin from TBI and Antonio Garcia Zabalos from the Asian Development Bank. We're going to have a quick reactions to the discussion with Pei Chin. And for those of you tuning in, we will be inviting comments and questions from you through the chat. This will then be surfaced for our discussion later. But first, let me invite Dino. Dino, countries and Asia is a very interesting space. It's basically a growth area. And I think our fear will not be about growing, but growing inclusively. As you are seeing about how we are all competing in the AI race, from digital infrastructure to human capacity, what sectors and jobs do you see being most transformed? And how can they tap into opportunities that enable inclusive growth? Hand it over to you, Dino.
Yeah, thanks, Sahara, for the question. So just taking off from what Pachin mentioned about co-intelligence and the idea of, co-intelligence and the idea of augmented intelligence. This is something that we're hoping to implement as far as our IT BPM sector is concerned. As we all probably know, the Philippines has a huge IT BPM like outsourcing community, and this is one of those industries that are really potentially in danger as a result of changes brought about by AI. So there have been directives on the part of government to work with this particular sector to make sure that they not only survive, but they're able to thrive in this particular age. So we have been working with them to ensure that what Pechin was saying about augmented intelligence will actually happen with this particular sector. So the routine tasks that they're currently working on, these are things that agentic AI can already take on. So it's now a matter of being able to move everyone up the value chain, provide them with additional opportunities, upskill them to be able to handle things like AI, human AI collaboration, data analytics, process engineering. So there have been programs that have been launched and programs that will be launched to equip our IT BPM sector to be able to do all of these things and make themselves more valuable in the process. But aside from IT BPM, the other sectors that we're looking at that would be potentially transformed as a result of AI would be our healthcare and agricultural sector. So if we implement AI properly, do it in the way that the report mentioned, we would be able to bring healthcare closer, especially to our geographically isolated areas, and provide them with meaningful access to healthcare that they currently do not have. The same is true for agricultural sector. Provide our farmers with type of tools that they can now use to be able to plan what types of crops to plant at a certain point in time, what's the best way of doing it. So these are things that we are pushing as far as the Department of ICT is concerned to hopefully give our people greater opportunity to thrive. And I think one thing that has to also be emphasized is our MSMEs, the medium small enterprises. If we are able to train them, provide them with tools so that they will be able to better demonstrate their impact, generate investor-ready profiles, then also connect them to markets and supply chain, then it will provide them with the tools and the digital skills to be able to thrive and therefore create a multiplier effect too. If they're able to thrive, then they'll be able to hire more people. And from there, we see that this is a concrete way of government being able to boost the economy by raising people up.
Fantastic. You know, what a brilliant introduction to our topic. Again, they know you've raised opportunities for augmentation in the IT and BPO sector. You've also extended it to its possibilities in healthcare and agriculture. And, you know, this agriculture, for instance, and its ability for it to be revolutionized by AI is something that is talked about, but execution will be very, very key to that. And you've also raised SMEs, very important segment in so many economies. I just want to turn to Emmanuel. Emmanuel, do you see the same opportunities as Dino has raised, or or do you see additional ones or challenges perhaps?
Thank you. Again, my name is Emmanuel. I lead our training and certification and education business for Amazon Web Services for the ASEAN region. So, of course, the countries that that Paylin mentioned in terms of the research, Singapore, Vietnam, Philippines, these are countries on our radar. And we, of course, do conduct studies and research across these countries and as well as globally. So I just want to start with first by saying that AI does represent an unprecedented opportunity to accelerate both innovation, but also create new types of jobs. And that's also what we are seeing at this stage. Let's be frank, we are right now essentially in a techno-economic shift. And I like the comparison previously to the Industrial Revolution. The fortunate thing is that we have seen these kind of transformations and these kinds of techno-economic shifts occur previously. So we have good data on what these trends typically mean and what's happened to jobs. So, for example, what we are seeing is that AI will continue to offer potential for some meaningful impact and also open up some possibilities. So we actually conducted a study recently, and this study is available online. And we were looking specifically at early entry and early career individuals. And that research actually reveals a very compelling paradox, which is that while young adult and unemployment has actually reached about 6 to 7% in certain countries. And that's the highest in a decade outside of the pandemic. However, AI is simultaneously also making these technical roles, especially in the technology sector and the techno adjacent sectors like the financial services sector, it's actually making it more accessible to just starting those careers. The catch, of course, is that these roles now require mastery of more complex skills, and some of those skills were just mentioned. Because AI has really essentially automated many traditional entry-level tasks. So I'll give you a couple of examples. So, for example, the findings show that nearly 50 to 55% of early career workloads are now AI augmented. So this isn't a future scenario, it's today's reality, where entry-level workers are contributing to more complex projects from essentially day one, and they are able to deliver insights in a few hours instead of weeks. So two roles, for example, software development. So the AI revolution has certainly hit the software development engineers, and they're experiencing perhaps the most dramatic transformation we've seen in a few decades. Essentially, when there was a time when junior developers would spend hours manual coding and debugging, and now they are able to leverage AI coding assistance. So they're able to actually provide and contribute to innovation much earlier in their careers than previously, where it took them, time to build up that level of experience. The same actually is true for data analysts as well as data engineers, where they're entering the job market but able to provide more business insights much earlier than previously. And finally, I'll talk about one other role, which is cybersecurity. So this is typically a role that took decades of experience to actually enter this field, even within a highly technical field like the ICT sector. But as AI is automating threat detection and response, many entry-level professionals are able to actually focus on sophisticated security challenges. So making this historically experience-heavy field much more accessible to newcomers. So we are seeing barriers to entry being lowered because of AI.
Nice, nice. This is Emmanuel sharing with us that the occupations that are really being affected, the job roles, and he's zooming in really on the entry level, the redefinition of entry level tasks in an age of AI, who's impacted, but who's augmented, and how the opportunities now actually requires us to rethink what building expertise means now from the traditional ways of thinking about it just 2 years ago, right? Very nice, Emmanuel. So you have just extended the discussion from Dino on industries, on type of enterprises to the occupations. Can I now turn to Antonio? Antonio, what do you have to say about this very, very interesting development that is really what disruption is about? Disrupt all the standard markers of what is expertise, who is valuable, and also what sectors are important, because Emmanuel is talking about software development and cybersecurity, and saying that these are the sectors that actually have been the heaviest impacted by AI disruptions. We are clearly not in a standard period of times here.
Thank you very much for the question, and let me just elaborate a little bit on what Dino, Emmanuel, and Pei Chin has mentioned. For the ADB, AI, and more than AI, I would say digital transformation has turned into a major priority for our president. That is the case that the ADB decided to create a specific and dedicated digital specific sector that is going to be supporting the region in terms of implementation of AI solutions, as well as the fundamentals associated to make that possible. I think that we have been hearing a lot about the skills. We have heard about the need of policy associated to cybersecurity, but also we need to consider what is the infrastructure that is up there. So along with that comes two specific aspects. One is the funding. How are we going to make sure that eventually the AI solutions that are at the very end of the value chain are sustainable? And to do that possible, we need to make sure that the countries are prepared in terms of the fundamentals to make sure that they can implement the AI solutions across different sectors. The ones in which I have been experiencing more involvement of the bank are those related to transport, energy, and agriculture. And many of them are related to solutions related to agri-tech, related to even climate change, and solutions related to cadastre and how to improve the efficiency in the provision of public services. But I think that it is important to keep in mind what is the magnitude of the gap, what is the way in which we can work together, public sector, private sector, civil society, academia, in such a way that AI becomes a tool that is put at the disposal of everyone. It's not a luxury product, but it's something that eventually can be used across the different social strata in a more equitable way.
Fantastic. I think, Antonio, you've raised something and kind of like make me recall a period that most of us have gone through, the period when we had to put computers in every home. In a way, that what was a period that was also about a massive partnership across different segments of society. The policymakers, the various community segments, employers, all coming on board, education and training providers, all coming on board to make the transition from analog to digital in primitive forms through computers possible. I just basically shows to us where we are at now when it comes to AI, and if we actually need to think a bit differently from the previous periods when we think about inclusion, social mobility, and economic opportunity. I just wanted to turn to Dino for your thoughts on this. Is this the same as when we had to put computers in every home, in every hands of every school children? Or is this a different type of revolution? And what aspects of policies need rethinking in the way we design social mobility and economic opportunity in an AI age?
I think it's a little different than putting computers in different homes. Of course, I mean, if for people to be able to take advantage of all of these opportunities, they would need to have access to computers to begin with. They would need to have access to a lot of these necessary infrastructure. But I think the rethinking that we need to have goes beyond simply providing access. So I think for us, for workers in industry to be able to fully tap into a lot of these opportunities, we need to get the foundations right. And for us, specifically in the Philippine context, we need to prioritize three things. The first would be trusted training data. I mean, AI systems are only as good as the data that we put into them. And if the data is polluted, it's filled with misinformation, or it's biased towards context outside of the Philippine situation, then the benefits will be unevenly distributed. For us, we must put in place policies that are focused on ensuring clean, diverse, and culturally relevant data sets. And this includes potentially building local data sets in our own languages, taking into consideration the context for the Philippines. I mentioned earlier healthcare. From the perspective of healthcare, if we are to implement it properly in a way that would be reliable for the Filipino people, then database should be localized. It should include the genomes of those that are sought to be treated following that particular AI system. So we can't just import something and expect to roll it out quickly. So we need to put in place policies that would ensure that there is a localized context and there is a process of doing that. The second would be putting in place policies for robust digital infrastructure. I mean, without reliable connectivity, cloud access, and compute power, AR opportunities will remain concentrated for those that would have access to them and generally be centered on the urban areas. And those that are in the rural areas would not or would have a very hard time accessing them. Now, we understand that government will not be able to provide these infrastructures by itself, but that would mean putting in place or putting out policies that would make it make sense for the private sector to start investing in putting these digital infrastructure that would be necessary to enable AI to proliferate in the country. So we will need to work with the private sector to identify what are their pain points and be able to make it make sense again for them. For example, AWS, for them to put like a hyperscaler presence in the country, what would they need? Then the third would be continuous reskilling and upskilling. I think there is this for us. We believe that our people remain our greatest strength, and there are policies that have been issued that often treat education as something that's front-loaded, something that happens only once when you're young. But this is something that we need to rethink, and we need to redesign our education and our labor policies around this idea of continued upskilling and meeting people where they currently are. So this means providing targeted training for the regions, for the provinces, for those that are in areas where access to these types of trainings may not be easy to come by. And we will need to work with, again, industry to identify what are the skills that they need so that we can provide the necessary training to augment this skills gap. And for us, I think these three areas are the focus of policy for the country. And if we want AI to expand and not shrink opportunities, we need to work with a lot of, I guess, an entire ecosystem to be able to roll out the policies necessary to be able to have the opportunity to take advantage of what AI can bring to the table.
Fantastic. I think we have kind of a mini ecosystem here on the panel. You know, in terms of really, you know what you're saying, we need that kind of trusted training data that's actually bringing those kind of opportunity into the understanding of the data sets and what actually we are building from the AI capabilities into something that's meaningful on the ground. We'll talk about the role of private sector coming together to support that kind of infrastructure building that allows for those contextualization. And we talk about education. Now we have here our tech partner. We have here our bank, finance partner, and Pei Chin, I'm going to ask you to take the reskilling question. But first, maybe Emmanuel, to you, this infrastructure that needs to be set up that's contextualized. And in this case, when we're talking about contextualized for augmented intelligence, Do you already see its potential? Are we on the right track? And do we need to do more so that we can make that contextualization and the vision that Dino has painted out for inclusive growth possible?
Thanks for that question. So this is, of course, a very fluid and dynamic situation. So any strategy, any tactic that's put in place will have to be constantly and consistently reviewed. So I don't know that any country, any community, or any organization can say we are done, we have a strategy in place. This is something that will have to be continuously revisited. Just as an example, the average time for a new foundation model to be released at this point is less than 36 hours globally, right? So this is not, so right now is not the time for complacence. But it also, I would say, this is also not the time where starting something is better than progress, is better than aim for progress, not perfection. And so continuously looking for what these opportunities are and keeping pace with the field is probably, the best advice we could provide. So as I just mentioned, right, that AI may probably replace some traditional entry-level tasks across different industries, across different job types, but it's also creating new opportunities. And the only way to be able to leverage and take advantage of the opportunities is to keep pace with the field. So that's one. The other that we work with as we speak to business leaders and policymakers and so on is to understand how do we help citizens and employees and learners gain AI fluency. We've talked about today about general AI fluency and how do they improve their talent strategy. So a couple of things that have been fairly time tested, which is AI skills do matter, but the soft skills cannot be overlooked. And so this is, again, ensuring that we train individuals across the AI tools available, but also ensuring that they have domain-specific skills, whether that's a specific industry or a specific subject matter expertise. As an example, if we have doctors today, we're not expecting doctors to become AI engineers, but we are expecting doctors to be able to leverage AI tools that allow summarization so they can actually spend better time with their patients and focus on better patient outcomes rather than note-taking, which a lot of doctors do in the healthcare sector. The other is to, again, leverage on AI-powered learning and digital assistance to both personalize and enhance the learning experience. And that too are fairly simple things to do today because there's a lot of training content that's available for more or less free. At Amazon Web Services, we make a majority of our content free and we democratize access to this. So anyone with an email address and access to the internet can access our training content. And we update this training content regularly so that it's most relevant and keeps in touch with industry trends. The other that I would say also is to really implement cohort style training because this is not something that we want just individuals to have learn in isolation, but be part of and be attached to a community, because that's going to foster a culture of both agility and innovation. And one of the other things that's been very unique about AI education is typically education trends and learning paths were focused on theory, then experimental, then some sort of certification or accreditation, and then that cycle goes through. But AI in specifically, it's really important that learners get to build, whether that is business leaders or technical leaders. And so a lot of the times the learning that we provide actually has access to labs and services. So today, to be able to do prompt-based application development is something that's accessible to essentially anyone. And so again, I would encourage any policymaker, business leaders to ensure that building on AI tools is part of everyone's learning journey. And then finally, there is this intense pressure on trying to provide an ROI and say, hey, what is the ROI on a specific initiative? And unfortunately, AI does not lend itself to this. So it's like saying, what is the ROI on having email within an organization? There's certainly some productivity gains, but it's hard to measure. So it's really important that we look for outcomes that are different. Is it, hey, is the general fluency increasing? Is learners able to just use AI tools? Because I think those are going to be the benchmarks for a while before we can actually prove the ROIs on investment.
Nice. So that's a very extensive reply covering both the technology as well as the education dimensions of things. I really love what you said about them using AI tools to build things. Because I think the dimension of augmented intelligence has a strong component on creativity, right? I just wanted to turn to Antonio. Your thoughts on how the vision that Dino was setting out, what then does ADB and its social partners can do differently to make sure that we really make this AI revolution an inclusive one? Do we already have those strategies in place, or do we need to do things a little bit differently? And here we're talking about really fundamentally a different category of workers being augmented, right? Based on Pei Chin's presentation, it'd be like your farmers, it'd be like your beauty professional on the ground becoming customer scientists. What's your thoughts on those opportunities?
Thank you very much. I was listening very carefully to everything that has been said by Emmanuel and Leandro, and to my mind came up two specific things that I believe that are very important and that are complementing somehow how we can shape the strategy going forward. First thing has to do with data governance. I think that the institutional framework is going to be super important, and sometimes we realize that in contrast to, for instance, what is happening in the case of the Philippines, that they do have a clear institutional framework put in place. Some countries, what they are facing is institutional challenges in terms of not having a common, let's say, language and a common platform to train those data that they are collecting. That's the first thing. And the second thing is related to interoperability. So we have been talking about skills, we have been talking about the policy, we have been talking about the infrastructure, but one important thing is that at the end of the day, we are talking about data, and the data needs to understand to each other. So the data exchange platforms are going to be super important aspect to make sure that all the data that is up there and that somehow are contributing to train the algorithm, are understanding one to another. So to me, those are two specific areas where most of the countries in Asia Pacific needs, and I'm very much aware, are looking at, and where the bank these days are putting a lot of emphasis. Not to mention that at the end of the day, when we are talking about AI, it has implication across different sectors, but all of them has a common denominator, which is sometimes we will need to do particular digital payments, for which sometimes we may need digital ID, and sometimes we will need, to think in a collective way how is the best way to get efficiency in the provision of all the different type of public services.
Wonderful. Pei Chin, can I invite you to see what you think about the discussion so far? Do you think that we have covered what's really necessary in terms of making augmented intelligence a strategy for economic growth, but also social inclusion?
Thank you, Sahara, and I've been really enjoying the discussion. I think there are a couple of things that I just wanted to maybe pick up on, given my sort of background in skills and employability. I remember when I was working in the Mayor of London, and when Boris Johnson, then Mayor, set up the very ambitious, green plan for 2030. That I think he was saying that by then we should not be producing or selling any more non-EV cars. But the problem is that at that time we were lacking the skills for people to even lay down the cable to ensure that the energy infrastructure is sufficient for the rollout of EVs. So I think from my perspective, I feel like skills is always kind of playing a catch up to industry, and that shouldn't be the case. I really like what Emmanuel said about mastery. and also how we should be optimizing perhaps for outcomes and not for performance. Because when we optimize for performance, workers or students in this case are most likely to take a shortcut, right? Using ChatGPT to answer a question because it's the fastest route from A to B. But we're not really optimizing for outcomes in that sense. So I love this quote that says, logic takes you from A to Z, but reimagination takes you everywhere. And this is why I wanted to maybe bring it back to the presentation where I talk about relentless reimagination. And I think the ability to reimagine is not some airy-fairy thing, in the creative sector. It is very much needed when you're talking about a revitalization or transformation of industrial policies. It is very much needed when you're talking about organizational and management strategies. One example is, electricity was invented in the 19th century, and everybody thought, once we turn on the switch, we will see productivity increase. But it didn't happen. And it took 30 years for industries to be able to realize what this means and how they can properly harness it by redesigning factory floors, by redesigning their layouts to be able to harness the electricity, because those layouts were based on steam engine. So I think we don't probably have 30 years like in past industrial revolutions, because AI is here, and AI, it is here already, and it's impacting a lot of things. So I think the other skills, that I wanted to highlight is around reimagination, and how do we equip not only our learners, but also our workforce? How do we include them in these conversations to be able to reimagine their work? The second thing is I wanted to bring out from the research is that a lot of workers were telling us that they are using all these tools, but their companies didn't really give them ample guidance or know-how in terms of, are they allowed to use it, how to use it well. So a lot of them were sort of like using it on the side. And of course, that has a lot of confidentiality risks and exposure, right? So I think giving proper know-how and guidance to workers, and look, just to say, using ChatGPT is not cheating, for example. And I think this would really go a long way in supporting some of these workers to say, oh, this is a tool that I can use to enhance my performance. And of course, there are also other things like, differences in gender attitudes and so on. And I think this goes back to the accessibility question. Just because you've got the tool doesn't mean that everyone is able to use it and use it well. And I think the third thing I wanted to highlight is that a lot of debate when we talk about job disruption goes back to skills. And I really love the conference that Sahara, actually, you organized, because you said very strongly, if skills is the answer, are we asking the wrong question? So I think given that a lot of debate talks about skills and jobs, I think we need to balance the debate by looking at demand. Where is job reimagination coming from? Where is demand coming from? And I think this is where I really hope to shift the conversations into how policymakers need to create conditions for new jobs to emerge through investment, incentive for innovation, industrial strategy, and so on. Because leaving it entirely to industry risks uneven outcomes and growth.
Nice. Thank you. I just want to take one question from the floor. Dino, this is for you. And it's really connected to what Pei Chin just said. Like we are looking at things that needs to happen. Vincent Wong is asking, what do you think is the single biggest barrier for policymakers in implementing an augmented intelligence approach that Pei Chin has outlined? Really, she says you need to look at the demand side. So Dino, what do you think?
So I think it's difficult to identify a single thing. So let me try to put together a couple. Yes, I believe that it is important to look at the demand side, and that's why part of what we're doing in the department now is to be able to bridge that gap between the supply and demand, try to understand the demand side and provide an easy way to hopefully connect our workers with what industry needs, and to provide opportunities in the middle to upskill them and reskill them if that's necessary. But I think aside from that, just taking off from what Pei-Chin mentioned, so there is this idea that it is a tool, right? And we need to provide skills to people so that they'll be able to use it properly. But in order for that to work, I think it's not just skills on the part of the workers or the part of the employers, but we also need to provide skills for the policymakers themselves. Because for people to be able to reimagine things, to be able to work on making augmented intelligence a reality, they have to understand what it is. And they have to, I mean, in order to reimagine something, you need to have a good lay of the land. Is that whole process that has to happen where you're able to move them out of this fear of things changing to be able to have a level of understanding and confidence to be able to understand, okay, what can we now do given this opportunity? I think it's similar to this whole idea with digital transformation. People generally take an approach wrongly where they just digitalize existing processes. But what we need to do is to understand, okay, what are the opportunities that are now presented? And how can we now provide it in a way that's efficient so that we can now provide services effectively to citizens? So I think skills from both sides, on the policymaker side and at the same time on the employee side, so that we can really take advantage of what this opportunity is. That I think is how we should look at AI, not as a something that's just disruptive, but also an opportunity to do a whole lot.
Fantastic, Dino. That was such a humble response, really, in terms of saying that the policymakers need to really see what is the potential for it and to see it themselves and understand it deeply. We've come to the end, close to the end of our session. I just could not take any more questions from the ground, but I hope all those of you who are there have found this webinar useful in terms of thinking about what it means for your own economies and countries. I just want to ask the panel members one last question. And this is really from where your vantage points are. You've just ended this panel discussion and you're going into a meeting with a policymaker, or for dinner, you're meeting your fellow policymakers, What's the one thing you're taking to them as an immediate next steps? Please, go first, whoever who wants to go first. What's that one thing you're going to take to them from this webinar that you would like them to take as an immediate next step? Emmanuel?
Yeah, thanks. And by the way, that is actually happening. We are speaking, of course, to policymakers, business leaders, leaders from sort of many different types of backgrounds and different industries and so on. So about three things. The first is Gen AI and AI is going to do more for us than we ever imagined. And it's going to accelerate opportunities. But to really leverage and take advantage of that, it's going to be really important that we equip our learners, our citizens, our employees with both the AI skills, but also the soft and hard skills. So this is, again, reimagining their education end to end, number one. The second is, well, no one can really predict how this will unfold, right? Given just the rapid pace of AI development, if we just go back 2 or 3 years to where we are right now, this is developing at a speed that is hard to fathom. And so it's hard in any which way to control that. But one thing leaders can control is the environment that they create. And so within that now, this is really the time that leaders can examine their current situation, the culture, ensuring that it's supporting ongoing learning, critical thinking, and also experimentation. And then there's also that focus on empowering the workforce wherever they are to make sure that they are able to take on new challenges and that there isn't a cost to failure, but there is a large incentive to continue to experiment. And one of the ways to do that, of course, is to make AI services and tools and learning as accessible to learners as possible.
Very
Thank you.
nice. Antonio.
Thank you. Thank you very much. But in my case, I will say probably to try to be realistic, understanding what is the starting point. Rather than using buzzwords or just copying from some other countries, understand what is the reality that the country is facing in terms of technical, financial, digital skills, and institutional capacity, and based on that, come up with a programmatic approach that eventually is making the country move little by little as they are reaching or they are overcoming particular challenges. Thank you.
Wise words from Antonio. Realist, start from where you are and take it forward. Pei-Chin?
So it would come to you as a surprise that I would say invest in human-centered transition systems. Policymakers should really focus on building agile worker-centered systems that can really respond to emerging disruption, because there will always be changes, right? So focus on supporting the workers and not protecting jobs, because some jobs will go and it's not always a bad thing. So use policy levers to generate new high quality jobs in AI enabled and other adjacent sectors, and ensure that your skills investment meets real opportunities.
Nice. So that's a call for quality jobs with AI. Dino, what would you say?
The first would be to understand, following from what Antonio mentioned, right? To understand where we are and where we want to go. I think there's sometimes this aspirational aspect when it comes to AI. We want to be like Singapore. We want to be like this. But that may not necessarily be realistic given our current context. And we need to plan out how we get there and what would actually be best for our people. And speaking of people, the next thing I think would be to ensure that we invest in people in as much as we want to invest in the infrastructure that enables AI. For me, the test to ensure that AI delivers the opportunity that we've been talking about is whether it is accessible and provides that benefit across all of the different spectrum of our population, and not just in the urban centers. And for that to work, we need to work together, both the private sector, the policymakers, and in industry, to ensure that we will be able to come up with something that is sustainable, that provides genuine mobility and opportunity for everyone. So for me, that's how I look at it. It's not something that government can handle by itself. We don't know what we don't know, and we need the private sector and the academe and industry partners to work with us to be able to put in the necessary policy.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I hope this leaves food for thought to everyone who's joined this webinar. Be realistic, but be imaginative. Look at technology, but look at people. Look at training, but ensure that it's actually supporting them to be creative and not just just using the tools blindly. So it leaves me to thank my esteemed panelists for such a rich discussion, and I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I did. And we look forward to the next webinar for a much more deeper discussion. Thank you, everyone.